Chances are you already know you've got unused and over-permissioned cloud identities lying around creating unnecessary risk. You've got IAM and cloud-native tools giving you tons of visibility into the problem, but you're kind of left to DIY the fix to it. This is exactly why we've created the Cloud Permissions Firewall. Sonry's Cloud Permissions Firewall is an action-packed, least privileged solution that's shaking things up a bit. What is so different about it? Well, we don't just stop at providing you visibility, we actually offer you an easy way to dramatically and instantly reduce access risk. Once the Cloud Permissions Firewall has monitored what sensitive permissions your cloud identities are and aren't using, with the click of a button, you can restrict excessive permissions, quarantine zombie identities, and disable unused services and regions, all at the scope of your choosing. The result is a dramatically reduced attack surface. A few things to note. Development is not going to be interrupted, because any identities using these sensitive permissions are added as exemptions to the policy you deploy, and our permissions on demand workflow grants access on the fly. And this doesn't mean more policy management for your operations team. You really just click a button and we handle that part for you. If all of this sounds too good to be true, let's see the Cloud Permissions Firewall in action. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Cloud Permissions Firewall. Let's get you familiar with the product. So, here's our homepage, and we are looking right away at the four main hero cards of the Cloud Permissions Firewall. These are the four things that the Cloud Permissions Firewall can instantly protect across your cloud and with zero disruption actually to your development and ongoing operations. So we are looking first and foremost at excessive privilege. What does that actually mean? This is cloud identities with access to sensitive permissions that they are not using. We expect about 92% of identities with sensitive permissions are not using them. So the Cloud Permissions Firewall, you're able to jump into preview and drop down by account view and see a list of all those identities that we have detected as having access to sensitive permissions that are actually not using them. And with the click of a button, you can go ahead and restrict and ensure that anyone not using those sensitive permissions does not have access to them. The great catch here is that we are able to see who is using those sensitive permissions, and those identities are actually added as exemptions to the policy you deploy, so their access goes completely unaffected. Taking a look at its neighbor over here, zombies, these are unused identities. Again, you can go ahead and preview and see a list of all those zombie identities. It's a much more fun name than unused. And this is any identity that is not active for over 90 days. And we call it quarantining. And with the click of a button, you can quarantine these zombie identities. What does quarantining mean? This means that these identities are almost fenced off, you can think of it as. So you're not removing them, you're not deleting them, there's no fear around it, but you are actually restricting all sensitive permissions to these unused identities. So anyone that tries to use them is unable to. You're able to at a later date wake up these zombie identities. So there's amazing little risk. You don't have to remove them and delete them and worry if you have to use it down the road. You're able to actually just wake it up with the permissions on demand workflow, which is a whole other topic for us. What is a permissions on demand workflow? Don't worry, I've got you. Permissions on demand is a built-in and entirely automated access request workflow. How does it work? When an identity tries to use a restricted permission or wake up a quarantine zombie identity, an access request is automatically kicked off, where they can note a business justification and request a time frame for their access. This is then sent to their designated approver, who evaluates the request and either approves or denies. If it's approved, the requester can go about their task. This whole process takes minutes, and it's from the convenience of a chat ops tool you already use, like Slack, Teams, or email. Moving along though, lastly to unused services and unused regions. Again, you are able to preview into any unused services. You can see a long list here, and if you're not using it, you might as well go ahead and protect it. And with the click of a button, disable all those unused services, as well as control any unused regions that your team knows you are not using. So I will caveat all of this with an amazing point I actually didn't point out, that we're looking at an org level view right now. So yeah, you can take sweeping change and go ahead and click this mega protect your cloud and make massive risk reduction across all of these entities, but you're actually able to drop down into this menu here and drill down into organizational units as well as accounts. So let's open my health sandbox. And as we know, teams are using different services in their production environment versus a test account that your developers are messing around in, or a sandbox, right? So you want to be able to protect your cloud at different scopes for maximum flexibility. The last thing I'm going to call out is scrolling down into here, you'll see a long inventory of services. So you can actually restrict permissions at the service level. So let's dive into AWS Identity and Access Management. You'll see there are 39 sensitive permissions. And if we drop down into this individual account, we can see there is sensitive activity listed for 4 identities. So as I mentioned before, if your team were to go in and protect and restrict all those unused sensitive permissions, these 4 identities would be added as exemptions and completely unaffected, and can continue using these sensitive permissions with no change at all. So anyway, this is your first welcome to the Cloud Permissions Firewall, and thanks so much for joining.